Hey, so usually I charge students if they want me to have a look at their essays. However, last week I did something a little bit different just to mix things up and see what happened. I asked everyone on our mailing list to send me their essays and I said that I will have a look at them for free. Now, we had a really great response to this call and I have a great big pile of essays to have a look at. I've got a lot of work to get doing. So what we're going to do in this video is have a look at one of those. So this is an essay by a student called Damiola, and in this video I'm going to break it down into the 4 parts that your Ielts grade is going to be based on. If you want to have a look at the essay, that's down below. I'm not going to be reading out the whole thing because I think it's just going to take too long. So watch this video and have a read down below at the same time. Okay, so the first thing you're going to be graded on in IELTS writing is task response. And this is basically how well did you answer the question. And so for this essay, I think task response is probably the best thing they did. Now, if you have a look at the essay question is asking you to compare 2 points of view, and I think this essay does that, right? It does compare both points of view, it tells you a bit about both of the points of view, and it gives an opinion at the end as well, which is the other thing you're asked to do. Now, I do also think this essay doesn't quite have enough development. And what development means is that you need to build up your ideas and go into a bit more detail with all of your ideas. And I don't think this essay quite does that. The second paragraph is a little bit shorter and less well developed than the third paragraph. And if we do take a look at that third paragraph, you'll also see that they've used lots and lots of examples in there, but they haven't really done enough to build up this paragraph into more of an argument. And so to improve this, what I would suggest is picking a more narrow or more specific point for each of the body paragraphs. And it's very common when you get a question like this, you just say, oh, well, I have to talk about 2 sides. So I'll give 1 paragraph to one side and 1 paragraph to the other side. Now, what you really want to do is make each of those paragraphs something more detailed. So for example, instead of saying there are some physical traits that are innate, what you should really try and do is say something like, oh, well, for lots of things you need to be quick. So quickness is something that you're either born with or you're not. The other way of going about this might be to talk about a mental trait like confidence. So you might say, well, some people are born confident and other people aren't born confident. That might be something else you could talk about. But by picking something more narrow like that, you can really go into a lot more detail and you can maybe explore a smaller idea more completely than if you look at something really big. So I would recommend picking more specific points, and that's really going to help the task response here. Anyway, I would give this just about a band 6 for task response overall, because I think it does what it's supposed to, but maybe it isn't quite developed enough. Now, the second grading criteria we're going to look at is coherence and cohesion. Now, this is all about paragraphing and a few other things. And the paragraphing here really makes sense, right? Like all the paragraphs are around a topic. It has an introduction, 2 body paragraphs and a conclusion. They've separated out the paragraphs in the right way, so it all looks great from that point of view. Now, the other thing you're looking for from coherence and cohesion is something called progression. And this means that you kind of build an argument from start to finish throughout your essay. And I think this is where it starts to fall apart a little bit for this essay, simply because they've relied so much on examples, and I think that means it's hard for you to build an argument out of the essay as a whole. The other thing we might look at in coherence and cohesion is how do you use cohesive devices? And so cohesive devices are little phrases that we use often at the start of sentences to help organize your writing. Now, the author does use things like for example and to conclude, but I would love to see some more of those in this essay. And the other thing I'd say about this is you need to use commas when you're writing these. So for an introductory clause, like for example, always make sure you put the comma afterwards. There are also a few inaccuracies, like they say, oh, well, on the other side. Usually would say something like on the other hand, or conversely, if you're looking for an alternative. And here they put on the other side, which isn't something I would typically expect to see in an essay. So I think for all of these reasons, I would probably have to give this one a 5 for coherence and cohesion because I think there's not enough progression and I think the cohesive devices aren't quite there yet. The third category in IELTS writing is lexical resource. And lexical resource is all about the language you use. Do you use a wide range of language and do you use it accurately without any spelling mistakes? Now, in this essay, there are some really good examples of language. I love language like groomed and prominent. And there's also some phrases which are really nice. For example, they say, Michael Jackson practiced singing for hours. That's a nice little phrase. That's the sort of thing you'd expect to see. So there's some good stuff about the lexical resource in here. However, we also have some lexical mistakes in here. So there are a lot of problems with capitalization. So the names of places like Barcelona are not capitalized. And then some names are capitalized and some of them aren't. So Michael Jackson had a small m, big J. Celine Dion was the other way around. She had big C, small d. So we need to make sure we're always capitalizing the names, and I think that's something that's very easy to fix, but it's the sort of mistake you don't want to be making in the IELTS exam. There are also a few phrases in this essay that just aren't quite right. So for example, gain maximally isn't the sort of phrase that would hear together most of the time. In line of thought with this, I wouldn't say that. Actually, a word like similarly would be great here. And it was unveiled that. Usually unveiled would be for a new design or a new car. So unveiled makes sense, but unveiled isn't really the sort of word we would use with a piece of news or gossip. It was usually something we'd use with an announcement. Another thing which is quite interesting and some people might not realize is that if you use phrases like this, so in the introduction they've said exceptional and extraordinary. Now, this is something I see quite a lot when I'm grading IELTS exams, and the problem here is that both these words mean the same thing. So if you say exceptional and extraordinary, they both mean sort of both not normal, both very good. If you say exceptional and extraordinary, you're basically saying the same thing twice, and it looks a little bit like you're just trying to show off as many words as you can instead of trying to use words accurately. And it's not normal to say the same word twice. Like if I said, oh, the car was red and red, you'd think that sounded really funny. If I say exceptional and extraordinary, that sounds funny in the same kind of way. So it's not good to use two words that mean the same thing. Now, when it comes to grading lexical resource, for a band 5, the spelling and word mistakes in there have to cause confusion to the reader. For a band 6, the mistakes don't confuse the reader. You can still have a lot of mistakes at a band 6, but they're not confusing. Now, there are some mistakes in here with the lexis, with the words, spelling, all the things like that. However, I always understand what they mean when they use them, so I would give this a band 6. Okay, our final grading criteria is grammatical range and accuracy, and just like the name says, we're looking at the grammar. Do they use lots of different types of complex grammar, and do they use it accurately? Now, the first and maybe the biggest problem with this essay in terms of grammar is there's just too many simple sentences. We really want to be using more complex grammar and taking more opportunities to show off in this essay. Now, I've put some examples on the screen up here that you can have a look at. These are some simple sentences that I think you could be doing a little bit more with. So if your writing looks something like this, maybe try and add some more complex grammar to your IELTS writing. I've also picked out a few sections where I thought there were maybe quite a few grammatical errors. So in this section, there's a lot of different problems with it. They say some group of people believed in the former opinion. I think this should be in the present tense, because if you say some people believed, it means they don't think that way anymore. So I wouldn't use believed here, I would use believe in the present tense. I would also not say some group of people, because I think you're talking about one group of people here. So I think you could just say some people, or one group of people would be fine for this. I also picked out this little sentence here. There's a few different problems with this. I would put this bit, a well-known footballer. I've separated that off with commas because that's a good type of complex grammar you can add. It's called an appositive. You can check out our video and materials on those. I've also added an apostrophe to 1800s, but the biggest problem with this sentence is does not really undergone any school. I would say something like never underwent any schooling, because this should be in the past tense, okay? Does not is in the present tense, and then undergone is not right either. So these are some of the grammatical errors that are holding this down. Now I think because there's so much simple grammar in here, and because there's so many errors, I think this would probably struggle to get a 6. I would probably give a 5 for grammatical range and accuracy. So overall, I would give this a 5.5. I think they have some strong points and some weak points. So for task response, a 6, coherence and cohesion, a 5, lexical resource 6, grammar 5, 5.5 overall. Now, I do think that this writer could make some pretty quick progress with their writing based on what I've seen, especially in the areas related to structure. I think you'll often find that's the area where you can make the most improvement. So if they worked a bit on their structure and particularly on their body paragraphs and really making them a bit more specific, that would build up this type of progression. I think it would make them more able to make a strong argument through the whole thing, answer the question a bit better, and improve their task response score. And I actually think like it wouldn't be too much of a goal to try and get up to a 7 for task response and coherence and cohesion fairly quickly. Now for lexical resource and grammar, I do think that might need a bit more work. You probably want to find someone who can give you some feedback on your writing quite regularly, because that's the best way to deal with mistakes. And I would also say you should really be focusing on a few types of grammatical structure. And with that grammar, you don't need too many different types of grammar, but you do want something you can use over and over and over again in every essay you write, and something you can get right every time. Some students love to study many pieces of grammar, and I always say just learn like 3 or 4 sentences that are complex, are very flexible, so you can use them over and over again, and really master those complex sentences and show off in your Ielts exam with those complex sentences every single time you write it. If you've enjoyed this video and you would like to get some help with your Ielts, do check out our website, practicalielts.com. We've got courses, we have tutoring available, we have all sorts of free resources on the site. Head down to the description, click the link, and you can find all of that there. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe this video, and if you have any comments or questions, just leave them down below and I'll get back to you.